Welcome to the first lecture of Python for Chemical Engineering Calculations. My name is Gennady Gore, and I'll introduce you to some tools which hopefully will be very useful. So in front of me there is a window of Anaconda Navigator, which provides you with a bunch of various tools, and the one we're going to start from is Spider. Okay, so here you can see three windows, and we're going to be using only one of them this time, but we're going to be using more in the future. So the window we will use right now is the window where I'm making my font a bit larger, is the Ipython Console. This is a console where you can use commands for Python. They will be directly executed. So this is essentially similar to your calculator. You enter a command, you hit enter, and it works. And it's a great tool to start with. So first of all, I want to say how these videos work. So if you will just watch the videos, I don't think it's going to be that helpful. So what I strongly recommend is to repeat what I'm doing in my window on your computers, and also potentially take notes, save your notes, and go through them afterwards. So let's start. And a typical start with any programming language is printing hello world. It's pretty easy to do it in Python. You use the command print, you use parentheses, and you put the string hello world in quotation marks. You hit enter and the interpreter prints you hello world. One thing which I want to mention about Python, it is a scripting language. It's interpreted rather than being compiled, unlike many other programming languages. So let's start with computing. Let's start from basic math. And as I said, you can use Python simply as a calculator. I can start from entering a number, hitting enter, and it prints me the number. Well, I can add a simple mathematical operation, and Python will execute this operation for me. Well, it doesn't have to be adding. It could be multiplication, or it could be this multiplication, or it could be a series of different operations. For example, 2 times 0.5 squared plus 3 times 0.5 plus 1 over 0.25. All right, and it calculates it, and it applies a certain order of arithmetic operations similar to the order we're used to. One thing I want to emphasize here is this sign, double multiplication sign. It's an exponent. It's a 1/2 power 2. So in addition to the 4 common arithmetic operators, we can also use the following operator, the percent, which doesn't mean percent, it means a modulo operator. It gives you a remainder from an integer division. So in some programming languages, percent sign used for writing comments, but not in Python. In Python, the comments are started with the number sign, the hashtag, and everything written after it is simply not executed. So this is a comment. All right, so dealing with simply arithmetics is not very useful. In programming languages, we often use variables. So let's introduce some of our variables. Let's introduce a variable a equals 2. Well, if I print a, it prints me the value for this variable. Well, now let's say I want to use a variable b. If I print b, it will give me an error because the variable b is not defined. So I have to define the variable first before I'm using it. So I can say b equals 2, or I can say that b is a certain function of the variable a. So for example, b equals a times 3. I print b, and it's now 6, right? It has a different value here. Please note that I did not introduce a type of a variable explicitly. Well, here, obviously, these are all integer numbers, but variables doesn't necessarily have to be integer. But once we assign a certain value to our variable, Python automatically assigns a type for the variable. So if I print type, and this function will return me the type of a variable, which comes in the bracket after it, it will be type integer. So the same thing will be for the variable b. Now if I introduce a variable c, which is, let's say, a divided by 3, right? So the type of my variable c will be different. It will be float. Why? Because if I print c, obviously c is not an integer number. It's a floating point number. And Python automatically assigned these type to this variable. So same thing, well, it doesn't have to be a number in this decimal form. We can use a number in the scientific notation. So let me have a variable d, which is 602 e power 23. And the type of this variable will be float. One important point I want to emphasize is that this is not a good name for this variable. Well, of course, all you recognize that this is the Avogadro number. So the best way to call it will be NA or N Avogadro, so that when somebody looks at your code, they immediately recognize what you're talking about, right? And one thing which I want to show you is this variable explorer, which we have here on top, which shows all the variables we introduced, the types of these variables, and the sizes and the values of these variables, right? And now we want to start from scratch. We will have to use the following instruction in Python, %reset. If I do that, it says that once deleted, variables cannot be recovered. Proceed, yes or no, and I say yes. And with this, I wrap up.